Welcome back, pre-algebra students. We're in lesson 18. We're going to talk about multiplying fractions and whole numbers. Now remember, with multiplying fractions, we can just multiply straight across the top, right? If I were to say 1/2 times 3/5, the answer would be 3/10 because we just multiplied 1 times 3 and 2 times 5. Easy peasy. But what if we needed to multiply times a whole number? How would we do that? Well, remember a few lessons back, I told you that to make a whole number a fraction, we just put it over 1. And if you think about it, that makes perfect sense because 3 divided by 1 is still 3. So that does not change the value of that number at all. So to turn it into a fraction that way is very sound logic. And a lot of math is just logic. 1 times 3 is 3, and 2 times 1 is 2. So the answer to 1/2 times 3 would be 3/2, all right? And if you think about that, that makes sense too. Because if you have a half 3 times, you're going to get 3/2, right? Or 3/2. So that's an easy number to see, or that's an easy way to prove that it works. So let's jump in and do some multiplication of fractions times whole numbers. Let's do 2/9 times 4. So we would rewrite that as 2/9 times 4/1 because 4 divided by 1 is still 4. It is the same value. 2 times 4 is 8, and 9 times 1 is 9. So 2/9 times 4 is 8/9. Now, a lot of times we're going to be doing some word problems, and in those word problems, you're going to see the word of. The product of two numbers. Of, in mathematics, typically, especially in word problems, can represent multiplication. So when I see a problem like this, 18.1, when I see a number like that, or a problem that says find 3/7 of 42, that is a signal to me to turn this into multiplication. So what I would do is I would say 3/7 times 42. And then I would rewrite that with 42/1 as a fraction. Then I can do the math. And I can say that 3/7 of 42, that'd be 3 times 42. 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 4 is 12, divided by 7 times 1, which is 7. 126 divided by 7, that is what we call an improper fraction. An improper fraction is where you have more in the numerator than you have in the denominator. Now, typically in algebra, we would leave it just like this. In algebra, we hate mixed numbers. I mean, mixed numbers are awful. And the reason mixed numbers are awful is because whenever we want to do calculations like this, we have to undo them and turn them back into an improper fraction in order to multiply. So in algebra, it's actually better to leave it as an improper fraction, unless the only exception is if you can turn it into a whole number. So what I highly recommend is whenever you have an improper fraction as an answer, check to see if it is completely divisible by this number. If you get a whole number as a result, then you can reduce it, but only if you get a whole number. So let's check it. 126 divided by 7 is equal to 18. So 18 is a whole number. So when you have that situation, then go ahead and divide by 7. However, if you had 123 or 124, we would not turn that into a mixed number. We would not divide that. We don't want to have a whole number and a fraction here. That's a mixed number. We want to either have an improper fraction or we want to have a whole number. Those are the only two results that we really like in algebra. And that's because they're easier to do calculations with than mixed numbers are. So let's look at 18.2. 18.2 says, what number is 5/7 of 12? So when it says what number, that is that's a question, right? It's saying we don't know what that number is. And anytime it says we don't know what that number is, you can substitute in a value that represents an unknown. And for an unknown, we typically use what's called a variable. A variable is just a letter that represents a value, and the value is something we don't know. That's why we use the letter. So in this case, we're going to use an X. Whenever you see the word is in a number sentence or a word problem, is the equal sign. So we're going to put equal right here. So 5/7 is whatever, a 5/7, that's the fraction. We write it just like it is. We don't have to translate that. Of, we know, means multiplication. So we're going to put the multiplication sign here. And then 12 is just another number. So we write it just like it is, right? So the number that we're looking for is going to be 5/7 times 12. That is all this statement is saying. It's giving us a number problem in words. So now we're going to see if we can find what this is. Now notice I've got an X here and an X here, but this X means multiplication. That is why a lot of times in algebra you see a dot right in the middle to represent multiplication so that the variable is not confused with the operation of multiplication. So let's just use the dot in this instance. All right, so we need to turn this into a fraction. So we're going to put it over 1, and then we're going to do the multiplication. The number we're looking for is going to be 5 times 12, which is 60, over 7 times 1, which is 7. Can we turn this into a whole number? Let's check. 60 divided by 7 is not a whole number. So what do we do when we don't have a whole number? We leave it as an improper fraction. This is your answer. And that is all that we have for lesson 18. And I will see you in lesson 19.